Hi everyone, welcome to our podcast. I'm Aurore Zadeling and today I'm pleased to introduce you to Amaury Gérard, founder and CEO of Umbrella, and Peter Nobles, director at PwC. In our last podcast, we talked about the people value proposition. Today we will focus on one of its key components, mobility. Mobility is a key component of the people value proposition because it offers workers the flexibility and convenience to choose how they commute. Hence, they improve their overall job satisfaction and work-life balance. But before we start our discussion, Amaury, could you please tell us a bit more about you and Umbrella?
Yes, sure. So I'm Amaury Gérard and I'm the CEO of Umbrella. Umbrella is an HR platform. We started in 2021. And actually what we do is helping employers to decrease their carbon footprint and increase their employees' well-being by implementing flexible and sustainable mobility benefits. So simply put, we help companies to implement flexible mobility plans.
Thank you, Amaury, for sharing about you and Umbrella. I'm excited to talk about mobility today because we kick off the Mobility Week. And that's actually a good opportunity to reflect on the way we move and the choices that we have in terms of mobility. But no, Peter, let me ask you, why is it important to talk about mobility in the context of the workforce?
Well, it's a good question, Aurore, and I think you already touched upon it in your introduction. As you say, it's all about the employee value proposition that you provide as an employer to your employees. And if you think about it, in average, Belgian workforce commutes about 21 kilometers from their place of living to their place of work. Those 21 kilometers takes about 40 minutes in the morning and 40 minutes in the evening. So it's in total 1 hour 20 a day that people are driving, walking, biking, whatever, to their workplace. Now, if you look at some research, 40% of the Belgians indicate that they get stress out of that commute. And so the main question that an employer should ask himself is how can we make that experience for our employees more easy? It's not a very easy question to answer. Because obviously there are a lot of fixed ideas around mobility and specifically around company cars. I think needless to say that we all know that Belgium is a country that is known for its tradition of company cars, and they have the perception that they create that ultimate freedom. But as we look at the amount of time that we spent in traffic jams, there was a report from the Flemish Traffic Center, for example, that came out just last month saying that we are at a record high of time that we spent in traffic jams since the beginning of measurement. I think it's really now time that we look at challenging those fixed ideas and really look at other solutions. Not only because of the time that we spend in our cars, but also because more and more changing expectations of external stakeholders and the workforce generations. What people today, when they join a new employer, no longer ask automatically is when do I get my company car? Especially younger generations are looking to other means of transport as well. And I think it's our task as an employer to look at that. How can we reply to that?
Yeah, we see the same. And actually, in the past, the company car was really considered as the holy grail of the salary package. And we are really shifting away from that to go for more flexible mobility. And there we can see some underlying trends as well. You mentioned the war for talents, which has a big impact. Employers really want to propose the best package, the most flexible one. And mobility plays a big role because it's a meaningful benefits, especially for younger generations. That's true. That's what we see with our clients as well. And we see other trends like, for instance, governments have a big role to play in that. They give a lot of incentives now for more flexible and more green mobility. In Belgium, we have a mobility budget, but we have also the change of taxation in 2026 for company cars. In France, they have similar systems, etc. So regulation plays a big role in that as well. And the final trend that we see in that is more and more interest in sustainability from companies. Yeah. And commuting plays a big role in the carbon emissions of a company. Up to 90% of the carbon emissions of a company comes from the commuting of their employees. especially in services companies where most of the work is done at the desk. Most of the emissions come from the commuting. And to illustrate this, we talk a lot, and that's right to do it. But we talk a lot about the aviation industry, the planes polluting a lot. But actually, the commuting represented double of the carbon emissions of the entire aviation industry. So if a company wants to act on their carbon footprint, they have to tackle the commuting of their employees.
Oh, that's really a surprising figure.
Yeah.
I know that about 65% of the workforce is commuting by car.
Mhm.
So I was kind of expecting that to be
Yeah.
a big figure, but twice is really an impressive amount.
Yeah, and it really shows that by just paying a bit of attention to the way your employees commute and incentivizing the right and green behaviors, you can really have an impact on your carbon footprint in your company.
Okay.
And Peter, if I may ask a very spicy question, how can we balance then the employee preference for company cars, even if we are aware that this trend is changing over time? So how can we balance employee preference for company cars with the sustainability goals of the company?
Well, indeed, a very spicy question, a very difficult question that a lot of employers are struggling with. And I think it boils down again to what we said earlier about the employee experience. Still, a lot of employees have in their mind that company cars are the ultimate freedom. And of course, the most flexible way to provide mobility to someone is still to put a company car or a car on the driveway of that person's house and that he can use freely. But of course, as we see that there are not only challenges in terms of CO2 emission, stakeholders putting a lot of pressure on that, but also on the time that you spend in that car driving to work with the traffic jams that are increasing, I think there is definitely a story to bring. And what is important is not only that as an employer you can bring that story of why do we need to change, but it's also about making sure that you demonstrate to your employees that those alternatives can provide the same level of comfort. And that is key, I think, in this kind of exercises. What we sometimes see is that some employers use this mobility topic a little bit as a greenwashing exercise. And they just say, okay, as of tomorrow, we also provide the mobility budget and you can choose alternative means. End of story, email was sent to all workforce and that's it. And then obviously what you can see is that the adoption rate of those kind of programs remain rather low. What's really the responsibility of the employer, I think, at least if you want to get some return on investment of implementing these kind of solutions, is to really make it clear to the employee what it's in it for him or her, to really help him understand that the level of comfort is still there, even if you look at alternative means of transport. How do you do that? It's, I think, an important role to play in the ambassadors that you can find in any workforce. For example, for one client, what we did is we really looked at what are the segments that exist in their workforce and how can we use those segments in terms of different needs of mobility and why they use certain mobility solutions, and really understand who are those representatives of those segments, to use them and use their stories and bring them in the communication around, for example, why to shift to public transport. What's the benefit of using public transport? Is it really that bad to use the train? Again, coming back to the research I mentioned earlier around the stress for commuting, actually, people that use public transport report 10% less stress than people that use private means of transport. So there's definitely stories to bring in your workforce already today, and using those ambassadors can really be a leverage, I think, in increasing the adoption of those programs. I don't know what you see.
Yeah, it's definitely, you have to have a holistic approach when it goes to mobility. When you start implementing such things in your company, it's not just about the company car, it's not just about the mobility budget, but it's about really understanding the needs of your employees. What is the most easiest way for them and the most comfortable way to come to work, to go back home, etc. What's possible for who, etc. And so that's why we always advise our clients to start with a survey with their employees. That's the easiest way to understand the mobility of your employees. Just ask them the question, and they will have a lot of things to say about it. And with that, you can really build a comprehensive mobility policy that will be balanced. Of course, some people will still need a car to visit clients, for instance. Those are already convinced that coming to work by bike is the good choice and are already doing it. They will continue to do that, and you can really propose that to the whole workforce. And working with ambassadors, we call them champions. You really identify your champions, and you always have people who want to be early adopters in mobility or just new stuff. They want to be the first. Find those champions, and then it will grow organically for sure.
Thank you very much for sharing these very concrete examples and good tips as well. I'm curious to learn about how you integrate the teleworking as also being part of the mobility policy or mobility strategy that you have. How do you see the interconnection between the two?
They are very well connected. And it's a bit related to the apparent complexity that you can think when you mention mobility. It's not that complex, actually. And why am I saying that? In the mobility budget, you have to know that the biggest usage done with the mobility budget, 67%, is to pay for housing cost in the pillar 2 of your mobility budget. It shows that actually the biggest usage done with the mobility budget is home working and is non-mobility, which is a form of mobility and must be part of a comprehensive mobility policy inside the company. Then after home working, you find other things like public transport and bike. So don't expect a big bang. Don't expect that all your employees will all of a sudden come with scooters or steps to the office, that you will have to foresee huge parking lots, etc. No, most of your employees will use home working as a mobility choice by default. So it's definitely part of the mobility policy.
Yeah, I think the best mobility or the most climate-friendly mobility is the mobility that you don't need to use. I think that goes without saying. Nevertheless, what we did see, I think we all remember those scenes back from 2020 when there was this famous lockdown period for a disease that I'm not going to mention anymore. And there were really those empty highways. And everyone was saying, well, thanks to teleworking and working from home, we will no longer have traffic jams. I think, unfortunately, what we see in practice today is that that's no longer the case. With working from home, what we also see is that there is also more traffic because people shop more online. So there's also more heavy traffic, more small vans that are driving around. So I don't think that it's a solution for mobility as such, but it does contribute significantly to the well-being of your employee and the experience that your employee has while working for your company. So I think it's definitely one to consider as an overall solution for your employees.
Thank you very much for sharing this. Any other trends that you see on the market? What's cooking there?
Yeah, what we see on the market, we see three clear trends. The first one is the mobility budget. We have already talked a bit about it, but we see a difference. It's really picking up for 5-6 months now. If you had asked me the question 1 or 2 years ago, my answer would have been completely different. Back then, we really had to evangelize a bit the companies, really explain the basics of the mobility budget. No, it's quite different. We have clients calling us directly, asking, can we implement the mobility budget as soon as possible? It's a big difference compared to the past. So we are definitely firm believer that the mobility budget will keep on increasing. It has increased 3x each year since we started, and it's really picking up still in the future. The 2026 deadline for the taxation of company cars will play a big role in the adoption of the mobility budget too, because the electric cars in 2026 will become by default a Pillar 1 car. So by default, the mobility budget will become the new standard in companies. So that's the first trend we see. The second one is what we call the total cost of mobility. So we used to talk about the TCO, the total cost of ownership, but we see that the TCO is becoming more and more complex because of the changes in the taxation, and it goes way beyond the TCO actually. We have now the mobility budgets, we have kilometer allowances, you have public transport subscriptions, etc. We have charging passes, which are also complex to manage. So it goes way beyond the TCO, and we prefer to talk about this TCM. So it was mobility was a topic for fleet managers, then it was becoming a topic for HR manager, and now we see that CFOs and financial managers are really interested in mobility too. And the third trend we see on the market is, of course, the electrification of fleet, which is the top of mind topic for the moment inside companies. And they are a bit lost because it's a total change of habit. They were used to manage cars, they were used to manage fuel cards, and now it's completely different. It's new infrastructure, it's new behaviors from employees, so they're a bit lost. The biggest need we see is that they don't understand, or they don't have the tools yet to understand the energy mix of their employees. Are they using home charging, work charging, or fast chargers, etc.? It's really hard for companies to have a good overview of what electrification means for them. So these are the three trends we see on the market: mobility budget, electrification, and the financial aspect of the total cost of mobility.
Yeah, and if I can add to that, Amaury, and what I find interesting about the umbrella solution is the fact that you integrate those trends on your application. And I think we talked earlier about how you will also start integrating for the electric fleet some information and some processes in your application. And I think that's definitely also a very important element when you look at implementing this for your workforce. You don't want this to become a very heavy administration that they need to be constantly aware about, that they need to follow up really precise to make sure that they get what they are entitled to. I think one of the important trends and asks that we see on the market today when I talk to clients is about having that integrated solution that really facilitates not only the administration for the employee, but especially also for the employer, because as you mentioned, all these new trends bring new things to know about, new things to take into account, new processes to set up, new things to process in payroll. So it's really overwhelming for employers. And if you have applications that can integrate that and feed that back into payroll, which at the end of the day is a little bit the end station for a lot of employers when it comes about reporting and providing own benefits, I think that's crucial, and that's something that we see as a differentiating element in the market.
Yes, definitely. And when I talk with clients about the complexity of new mobility, I always make the comparison with the company cars. Actually, managing a car, it's not that easy. Huh? You have mobility, multiple providers. You have to manage the fuel cards. You have to manage the repairs, the maintenance. You have to manage the preferences of your employees. So it's quite complex to manage, actually. But companies have been used to do it for years, so it seems easy. And it's the same with new forms of mobility, like the mobility budget. It seems complex at the first glance, but actually, when you have the right tools like Umbrella or others to manage it, it's much easier than managing cars.
Yeah, what you just explained, both of you, is actually that employers are really facing multitudes of challenges, and that requires innovative solutions. But I'm sure that our audience are also facing the same challenges. So, Peter, can you maybe summarize what are the biggest challenges for employers today and how can they overcome it?
Yeah, well, I think that there are the ones we mentioned about the increasing complexity is definitely not helping. I think they're making sure that you partner with the right partners because there is some specialization, let's say some expertise needed to manage all these different solutions. So that's definitely, I think, a challenge that we see in the market, but that is answered by a lot of vendors in the market. What we do, however, also see as an important hurdle for employers today, on which there are no easy solutions, unfortunately, is a somewhat unstable regulatory framework around all these. To give a very simple example, way in the beginning, when we were talking about the electrification of the fleet, some companies were even asking me, yes, but if we, for example, foresee a charging station at our office, are we becoming an electricity provider, and should we thus get the necessary registrations at CREG and so on? So those are really the early days, but still today we see that those kind of challenges are still there. Not later than a few months ago, there was an important ruling published around the reimbursement of charging costs at home. So when an employee charges his electric or plug-in hybrid car at home, and the employer reimburses for those electricity costs. In summary, I'm not going to go into detail, but in summary, what that ruling said is you need to look at the actual cost that the employee is having based on his particular contract with his electricity vendor. Now you can imagine that there are a lot of clients today that are scratching their ears and saying, how on earth are we ever going to manage that? Because if you are lucky and your employees have a relatively simple contract with a fixed price, you could say, well, it's easy. You just take the amount and you multiply it by the number of kilowatt hours. But unfortunately, the electric landscape is not looking like that. You have the complexity of reversing meters. You have solar panels. You have variable contracts that are there. You have the digital meters with your peak consumption that determines the price. So it's really an absolute administrative nightmare. And a lot of companies are now thinking about how will we ever process this and actually not finding a solution to date. So they go back to what the initial setup was. However, I do think that, again, it's a changing landscape where new technology is providing answers. We were talking earlier on with a big electric vendor, and they were talking about implementing new technology that could, for example, set up kind of a split immediately on the electric bill between what was for charging your car and what was for your home consumption. So there are definitely solutions out there. But it is all changing very fast. There are new solutions coming in, other solutions going out, and it remains at this day still a very fast-moving market and very difficult for employers to control it all and to understand it all quickly.
Yeah,
I don't know what your experience.
Nothing to add. That's a very good summary of that. There is a lot of complexity on the market. It's a complex topic. But employers are not alone in this. There are right partners to guide them into the solutions they should implement, and there are the right tools to help them in the day-to-day to manage these new forms of mobility.
Well, thank you. That's very complex topics of today. Any words you would like to add before we conclude?
Yeah, maybe I think an interesting one to see how that will play out, and it came already up. It's up in the press last month, I believe. It's really the divide that is starting to exist between the haves and the haves not. Right now, the mobility budget is exclusively available for people who have the entitlement to a company car, which means that those people not only have access to electric cars, which are often more expensive but better for the environment, but also they will have access to additional options within the mobility budget. They have access to the reimbursement for rent and the mortgage loan. And so this is really increasing their overall net pay. If you look at employees that don't have that entitlement to a company car, there was a publication a month back that published the 5 most popular cars for people that buy it privately. And those had a CO2 emission, an average of about 125, versus when you look at company cars, there the average is about 10. So it's a huge difference. And I think what for me would be a big step up is if the mobility budget would be opened up one way or another to all the workforce, not just for people with a company car. I think that would be for me an ideal scenario for the future.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And that's also what I wanted to mention to conclude this conversation, because that's something we've been lobbying for a long time. Not only for the equity between employees, but also in terms of simplicity. In Belgium, for the employees not having a company car, we have dozens of mechanisms to compensate their commute. We have kilometer allowances, we have the reimbursement of public transport, we have dozens of systems that exist right now. What we propose is to replace them all by one universal mobility budget that would allow every employee to have access to that kind of benefit that would have a huge impact on sustainability, because as you say, that will incentivize those employees to also take green mode of transport. And so everyone would win from that. It's really more simple, good for the environment, and no more friction between employees eligible or not for a company car. So let's hope that the next government will take that up and will implement it.
Yeah, and I mean, we are now at a time that technology is there to really be able to look at mobility budget and look at the actual consumption in CO2 emission of employees and to really link the two. So I think the time is now, that the momentum is there. So hopefully, indeed, the next government, when it will be there, can pick that up.
Yeah, and for the moment, because you mentioned that the link between carbon and mobility budgets, but for the moment, mobility budgets are in euros. What could be the future is to have mobility budgets in tons or kilograms of CO2. That will be a real progress, because it will have a huge impact on the sustainability and the carbon footprint of a company. So I think that might be the future, and a few employers might be ready to be pioneers on that.
Yeah, curious to see what the future will bring to us. Thank you very much, Amaury and Peter, for this enriching discussion. What I will definitely remember of today is that the mobility landscape is quite complex and really evolving very fast. So it's clear that mobility today is not just about moving from one place to another, but it's also about making sustainable choice and evolving, staying competitive in the markets, and so on. So thank you very much, and thank you to our audience to listen to us today, and stay tuned for the next podcast.
Thank you.